Welcome to DCL 502, Evaluating Shortwave Radio Propagation. Now to be clear, this is not a lesson on propagation prediction. This is instruction on how you can make your own real-time observations of shortwave radio propagation at your location anytime you want to. And of course, if you spend enough time playing with this, you will quickly learn about shortwave radio propagation without even knowing that you're learning, which of course is the most fun way to learn. So what are you going to need for this? Well, basically all you need is a receiver and an antenna. My go-to receiver right now is the ICOM IC7300. It's the best receiver I've ever owned. I'm not saying it's the best receiver. I'm just saying that it's the best one I've ever owned because $1,000 for a radio is about all I can afford. Now, I picked this thing up, speaking of money, I picked this 35-year-old Yaesu FT747 up for $60 at an auction. It works almost perfectly, although it's not the receiver the 7300 is. It hears almost everything the 7300 does, provided the band is not too crowded. But like I said, for $60, this is a tremendous value. Here's something that is not a tremendous value. I spent almost $200 for this because it's an antique. Analog receivers really don't work well for this, and you're going to see why in a few minutes, because in order to track all these signals, you need a lot of memories. So you can use one of these to a limited extent, but you're really better off if you can find a digitally tuned receiver. Now, what antenna do you want? Well, my go-to antenna right now is a 40-meter inverted V. It's up about 30 feet. Being a 40-meter antenna, it's about 33 feet per side. I just feed it with coax. It seems to be a fairly good compromise antenna for the entire HF spectrum, but I will confess I also have a 17-foot vertical antenna that I use on the higher frequency bands, like from 15 megahertz on up. You can use whatever you want to use since you're only receiving anyway. It is true that some of the stations are horizontally polarized and some are vertically polarized. With the reflections that happen in the ionosphere, it's not super important that you have an antenna polarized exactly like the transmit antenna. It would be in the VHF and UHF world, but in HF, there's so much reflection and refraction in the ionosphere that it's not that important. So put up whatever you can. Okay, now we need signals. What signals could we rely on as an indicator of what the ionosphere is doing? There's two kinds of signals. The ones like W1AW, the American Radio Relay League's broadcast transmitter. It's on the air at certain times, but it's not on the air on the weekends, and it's not on the air all day long, just at certain times. It's still helpful, but my favorites are the time and frequency stations and the amateur radio beacons that are on the air all the time. If you hear them, the band is open. If you don't hear them, the band is not open. It's as simple as that. Well, let's start with W1AW anyway. W1AW is, of course, the big broadcast station and contest station operated by the American Radio Relay League in Newington, Connecticut. If you go to their website, which I've got up here, I've got it with the W1AW appendix on there, you get this page. Now, you can use any of the colored circled links, but the blue one is the best. If you click it, you get this one, which you of course have to click again. Then you get this page. I know you can't read it, but I wanted you to get a quick look at it. The top part is the broadcast schedule. The bottom text tells you what frequencies are used for each mode. Now, for propagation studies, you can use any of their modes, their voice mode, their Morse code mode, their digital mode. It doesn't matter if you know Morse code, by the way. I will show you later that knowing Morse code is nice. It's not necessary when you're studying propagation. So here's the schedule. The very first thing you should notice here is the visiting operator time is not part of our study. You do not know what a visiting operator is going to be doing, so during those times, you don't look for the station at all. The other times, code practice, code bulletins, digital bulletins, and voice bulletins, those are the times you want to listen. Now again, these separate modes use different frequencies in each band, and farther down the page, they tell you what frequencies to listen for. If you have a ham band only receiver, WNAW is almost your go-to for propagation studying, other than, of course, listening to who else is on the air. So let me see if we can get my computer to play this video. This recording was made after sundown in Texas at 8 p.m. in the evening. This is a Morse code bulletin transmission from W1AW. Now that's pretty good. We are hearing W1AW from 40 meters through 15 meters. There is no propagation at 10 meters. There's very little at 80 meters, and there's no propagation at 160 meters. Now at the 11 o'clock bulletin, things change. We usually lose 17 and 15 meters, but 80 meters comes up really nice, and sometimes I hear them on 160. This, of course, lines up with the theory of how the D, E, and F layers are supposed to act. So let's take a look at time and frequency stations. Time and frequency stations are standard stations that run very high power, and boy, do they make nice beacons. The United States big ones are WWV in Colorado and WWVH in Hawaii. Now, I don't pay a lot of attention to those test signals from WWV on 25 megahertz, so just ignore that. But I do have these other frequencies in the memory of my receiver. These stations run tremendous power. W1AW runs 1500 watts. These stations run up to 10,000 watts. Now, the really cool thing is the transmitters are all in the same frequency. So if you're listening at 45 seconds past the top of the minute and you hear a voice that is female, you are hearing WWVH in Hawaii. If you hear a male voice at 52 seconds past the top of the minute, you're hearing WWVH. These announcements announce the time. And then twice an hour, they will also announce the station call sign and location. But every minute, you get a voice announcement of the time. The gender of the voice tells you which transmitter you're listening to. Now, don't worry about the fact that in the United States, WWV is often much stronger than WWVH. Because they're using double sideband conventional AM, and because one station that is not transmitting voice transmits a dead carrier when the other station is transmitting a voice. What it means is even if WWVH is very, very weak, if you can hear it at all, you're going to hear it no matter how strong WWV is. So let's listen. This recording was made at 7 p.m. in Texas after the sun had gone down.
the tone 0 hours, 24 minutes, Coordinated Universal Time.
Okay, the first thing you're going to notice is we could hear them on everything other than 20 megahertz. That's pretty common in the early evening. As the evening wears on, and I know I didn't give you enough time to tell, but as the evening wears on, you would also hear WWVH's voice in there too, right before the male voice. Now that works, like I said, at night. During the day, propagation changes a lot. Let's listen at noon here in Texas. So we picked up 20 megahertz, but we lost the lower bands. That's what we would expect. During the day, the D layer and the E layer are going to absorb the lower frequencies, but the F layer is going to get so healthy that it can refract or reflect 20 megahertz. There's one more station. This is a difficult one here these days in Texas. With the solar activity we've been having, CHU in Ottawa, Canada isn't heard very well down here. It's still interesting to keep an eye on it. They run fairly good power, but again, they are at an odd distance from me here. And as you're about to hear, this one is made in the evening. Not too bad. We can hear them on all three bands, but they're not very strong. Let's check them out at noon. Just as we would expect, the lower frequencies are gone during the day. Normally, the 14 megahertz frequency is better sounding than that during the day. Right now, we've, like I said, had some solar disturbances, so they're not sounding all that good here. Here's a map of the time and frequency standard stations plus W1AW. As you can see, you get a pretty good picture of what band is open in what direction. Thank goodness WWVH is running high power. It actually is well heard during the night here in the continental United States. Again, if the band is open, which the lower frequencies tend to be during the night. So that's really it for the time and frequency standard stations. And as far as that goes, that's it for W1AW. Now, the one that is the most fun for me to talk about. This is a relatively new thing in the world today. There are two major groups that got together and decided they were going to put together a beacon network. They planted 18 beacons around the world and set them up so they all take turns transmitting on 5 bands. As you can see, they've got beacons everywhere. Now, This system is a system of Morse code or CW beacons, but again, don't worry, I'm going to show you that you need no Morse code knowledge to use these beacons. They all run 100 watts, although actually as they're transmitting their power drops, and you'll see that in the demonstration. They send their Morse code ID at 100 watts, and then they send 4 dashes, or Morse code DAs, at progressively lower power. So you can really get an idea how healthy propagation is. Again, they run these vertically polarized antennas, pretty much the same model everywhere. They're not super efficient, but again, all we want is a little signal to judge what's going on. So go to the internet address shown in the upper right, and you'll get this page. Notice the Tools for Listener button. Click it. Clicking it was step 1. Step 2 is to click Transmission Schedule. Now you get this wonderful page. Your main business is section 1. That is showing in real time what beacon in what country is transmitting right now. In section 2, the status of all beacons is updated, so that blue box moves down 1 beacon every 10 seconds. I don't even look at section 2 most of the time. Section 1 is what I care about. Now with 18 beacons and 10 seconds per beacon, it takes 3 minutes to listen to every beacon on the planet. With 5 bands, you've got to listen 5 times. So it takes 15 minutes to get through all of the beacons. Now, section 3 is a little different. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so here we go. I got my radio set up. I got my laptop set up with the beacon page up. I've got a second window. This is called time.is. That's my clock. With that clock, I know exactly when something is going to transmit. You don't necessarily need that window up because the page, the beacon page that is, updates automatically. But I like having the clock because I know how long I've got to wait. As you can see, the display changes every time a beacon transmits. We're going to go through it one more time. Watch the lower line, which is the 10-meter line. You probably can't see it that well. Let me give you another video view here. Here's a better one. All right, watch the 10-meter display, and I will start the video. I know you haven't heard anything yet, but get ready. As I said before, sometimes the beacons aren't very strong, but if you can hear them, then the band is open. Or at least it's open to the destination where the beacon is. Let's say it that way. So as you can see, no Morse code knowledge is needed to use this network. And as I said before, most of the time you're going to stare at section 1 and listen to the radio. Once in a while, you might want to use section 3. If you click on section 3, you get this. Now you're going to take your mouse cursor and rotate the map around and center the map or the crosshairs on where you live, which I've already done here. I live in Texas. When you do that, the bottom part of the page is going to reload, and you're going to get this. There you have it. Every beacon, a beam heading to the beacon, a distance, and a propagation prediction for all 5 bands between you and that beacon. Now, these predictions are, well, they're fairly accurate. You'll see as you play with this. I'll leave it up to you to decide what you think of those predictions. So again, my favorite propagation indicator is the beacon network. No Morse code knowledge is required. And quite frankly, I'll admit to you that a lot of times the signal levels are noisy enough that I have a hard time telling who I'm listening to. But having the website up, I don't really have to worry about copying the Morse code. And I also know that an amateur operator in that country or that location is probably going to have a signal anywhere from 3 dB to 10 dB stronger than the beacon. The point is, the beacons tell us what is possible. And if you listen to the beacon network on and off over the course of the day and the night, you're going to find anomalies in propagation you didn't know were there. If you hear the beacon, there has to be propagation between you and that beacon. That's all there is to it. If you don't hear it, then there's no propagation. Or you forgot to connect your antenna, of course, but you know what I mean. I hope this has been helpful, maybe even entertaining. And in a future video, I'll get more into propagation. I want to do a video on VHF propagation, which is a world different from shortwave. I hope this has been enjoyable. Thanks for watching. See you next time.